So I recently had a very stressful, traumatic experience with an abusive person. And this is the first time I've ever experienced something like this because people have been angry at me before, people have been upset, yelling at me, but I've never actually had an experience that I would classify as abuse. And I wanted to make this video because I kind of learned like three things from this experience. And I wanted to share them mostly because abuse is a really hard thing to deal with. Abusive people can be very difficult and it can lead to violent situations. It could lead to dangerous situations. So yeah, let's talk about it. This whole experience started with me going on a trip. And I'm going to use the terms person A, B, and C because I don't want to drag like people's personal information out onto the internet, but I just feel like it's an important story to talk about. So I went on a trip with person C, we'll call them, and went to visit person A and B. And person A and B are what you would classify as difficult people. In the past, they have been quite nasty to person C, who's close to me. And but it has never gotten to the level that I would classify quite as abuse, or at least not abuse that I found like dangerous or yeah. So what happened this time is what usually happens when I visit person A and B, which is that person B has more of a aggressive type personality, the sort of person who always wants to be right and is very brusque and sometimes mean with the things that they say. And this person has never directed any of this potential abuse towards me. It's always been towards person C. And then person A is a little bit more kind of like passive, you know, like the type of person that can be sort of like mean in the background, like a passive aggressive type of person. So anyways, that's sort of the dynamic, is like these people A and B are kind of nasty to person C, and I have to like smooth things over. So probably for the past 10 years, I've been in this role of like peacekeeper between these three people, and yeah, it gets very tiring. So same thing was going on this time, except one of the last days of the visit, we picked up another person D, and at the end of the night, we dropped off person D, who is a bit older, and person A and person B just wanted to leave, and person D, who is older, had to go to a neighbor's house and feed the cats, and it was quite late. And this person had fallen recently, and they weren't quite stable on their feet. And so person C, who I was traveling with, suggested that we wait for a couple minutes, right? Just to make sure that person D was okay, because, you know, we cared about her and everything. And this upset person A and person B especially. They started to get a little bit nasty, and person C, who I was traveling with, started to get also very upset by this, because in that moment, it was like, this is not how you treat a human being. Like, you don't just drop an older human being off like in the dark, having to go, you know, to another house that they're not familiar with. And anyways, so we started driving away, and person C was still quite upset. She starts crying in the back seat, and person A and person B completely ignore her, like to a disturbing extent of like they're not even aware of a human being like in distress in the back of the car. And this sort of thing has been going on for 10 years. This sort of like borderline abuse, and I finally got sick of it. You know, like a lot of times what happens in abusive situations is that the person who is being abused, or people who know the person who is being abused, try to not like rock the boat, you know, especially when it comes to close relationships. You're just trying to keep everything together, and because like abusive people can be quite explosive, and it can just ruin a potentially good time for everyone. So, but I was just sick of that, you know, so I said, all I said was we should have waited for person D. It's hard to keep track of all of these A, B, C, and D, but yes. So as soon as I said that, person A and person B went just absolutely ballistic. They started yelling bullshit, bullshit, like, and explaining all of the reasons why it was perfectly fine to leave an older person in the dark. And, the conversation just got out of control from there. Like, everyone's yelling, and person C was continuing to cry in the back seat. And then we got back to the house that we were staying at, person A and person B. And I basically just said, I don't want to stay here anymore, because the situation has just gotten out of hand. I don't feel like this is good. And that made person B even more angry. Person A had like jumped out of the car at this point, because she was so furious. And so continued to have disagreements with person B, and they continued to get more aggressive. And then when person A got back, they got together with person B, and they sort of like drove each other up, like just out of control. And they started screaming. Person A was just absolutely screaming like a wild animal at us, just saying like the worst, most horrible things. Just pure hatred. Like, I've never seen, what anger looks like a person is really angry at you, but then there's a level beyond that. It is just like pure hatred. And it's like, it's a sort of emotion that just lodges in your mind for a really long time. I don't think that I've ever expressed that towards a person, like hatred. I've been angry with people for sure. But so person A stormed out, and person B got even more angry and more aggressive and started yelling like directly at my face and jabbing their finger at my face. It's your fault. You did this. You messed everything up. Da 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 da. Like, yeah. I think when people have gotten mad at me in the past, it's often like they'll almost like break eye contact at points. Like, you can see that they're sort of angry at the situation, but I've never had someone like jab their finger at me and say such nasty things like directly at me, It was really hard to experience. And so we ended up leaving the next day, and it shook me for a really long time, because I've sort of let this behavior pass in this person B, but also person A, for a really long time. Like I said, because I was trying to play peacekeeper. And so I think that was the first thing that I realized about this experience, is that really, like, I've been allowing these two people to act abusively and mean towards person C, who I was traveling with, for a really long time. And the lesson there with abusive people that act like this is that you can't even let it get started, because when you do, they almost interpret it as like you being okay and like even encouraging their behavior, even if that's not directly what's going on. And the longer that you let an abusive person go on and on like this, the harder it becomes to disentangle yourself, because they feel like they've gotten all of these yeses. So that was the first thing that I learned. I was really upset, I think, with myself. I let it go on for so long, even though person C kind of wanted me to try and keep the peace, I still think it was unacceptable for me to let this go on for so long. And then the second thing I learned about dealing with abusive people is just like space. The next morning, I woke up and person B came to the door, and I was actually a little bit hopeful because he seemed like he had calmed down, and I thought maybe we will be able to have a conversation, like I did this, you did that, like there's a lot of stress. And so person C couldn't even like come out to the living room to talk because she was just sobbing, you know. She'd just been completely shaken by this experience of feeling just utter hatred coming from these two people, and blaming and finger pointing and like aggressive finger pointing, and and also these people having weapons in the house and really not knowing how far they were going to go with this because they were just completely out of control. So person C is in the back room, so I have to go out and play peacekeeper again with these two people. And I started off by trying to extend an olive branch, just saying like this whole thing has been stressful for all of us, and this oftentimes happens because of trauma that we've all been through. Like all four of us have trauma from our childhoods, from things that we've gone through in life, and I was just trying to make some connection, some human connection. But person B, essentially, once I stopped talking, he was just sitting there, and he looked at me with this expression on his face that was like the expression that you would get from someone who thought that they were king of the universe and they were just expecting me to grovel at their feet and lick the boot, lick the salt off of their boots. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever experienced someone like this? It was, I know there are more like that abuse can go much farther than this, but there's something deeply humiliating and hurtful to like be trying to extend an olive branch to someone and be vulnerable and make a connection, and then they not only do they resist it, but they sort of act as if this thing that you were trying to give them is like nothing. Like you are nothing. You were just, like a piece of trash on their boot. And it was really horrifying to see this person act like this, because it was horrifying to see anyone act like this with so little empathy for another human being that is trying to like connect, So at that point, I basically said like, yeah, we're just gonna leave, because nothing is gonna be accomplished. It just seems like we're both too angry, upset still to really, make a connection here. And this person was like, made some sort of vague statement about like, do you understand the ramifications of you leaving? Like really threatening tone. And but we just had to leave. Whatever the implications afterwards, we had to get out of there because it didn't feel safe anymore, emotionally or physically. And so that's really the second lesson, I think, for me dealing with abusive people, is like you just have to get away from them. And if the situation is really threatening, then obviously you want to involve the police or whatever. That didn't happen here, fortunately. But yeah, and then after you get away, I think driving, we had to leave early. So yeah, that was also stressful because we had to figure out the morning of places to stay. And I was just reeling from the whole experience, just watching someone act like this. Yeah, and I couldn't let go of it for days, and I still I'm having trouble letting go of it. This person, just like the expression on their face, the way they'd acted towards me is just kind of like in my head, like a thorn. And usually I'm a pretty resilient and like tough-skinned person, but there are just some images that stick with you, like it just was something that a human being should not behave that way. So I did write a note to this person. They never replied, or at least they haven't replied yet. So I don't know if they are going to reply, if they're just so angry with me that, whatever but I think the third thing of dealing with abusive people is that once you get away, once you create some space, you have to also create boundaries with this person. And you have to figure out for yourself, like, what would it mean for this person to actually change? Because with abusive people, they tend to go in circles, like where they'll do something really mean and then they will apologize for it and they'll act nice for a short amount of time and then they will go on and they will do the same thing, and this will happen over and over and over again. So you stop at a certain point believing anything that they have to say. So I think the third part of it is you have to figure out what tangible, clear, exact boundary it is that they, or thing that they're going to have to do to prove that they are actually making not only making an effort, but that they've made some progress towards changing the way that they behave and the way that they think of you. And for me, with this person, it was that they really need to go to some kind of counseling, because this person has actually, both person A and person B have just been like I said, they experienced like really serious trauma in their childhoods, but they have just been plunging it down, for their entire lives. And so now they are just like two nuclear bombs, and they seem to think that everyone should treat them as if they are nuclear bombs that could go off at any moment. And you can't disagree with them. You can't even say the slightest of negative things, or they just explode. And so, yeah, I essentially said to this person, like, if we're going to have a relationship going forward, like, you need to do something about your temper. You need to do something about your trauma. And, I'm saying this obviously because I care about you. But I can't be around that. I can't be treated like that as a human being. It wouldn't be fair to me. It wouldn't be fair to you, because no one should act like that. So yeah, I guess to recap, it's like with abusive people, you don't let them get started in the first place. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you create space from them. And the third thing is you create boundaries going forward so that that they have actually started on the path to changing, and they are not just fooling you with kind of like false promises when they don't really intend to change anything. And in that stage, you can feel sorry for them, you can feel empathy for them, but you are no longer going to take their shit. And you are no longer going to be around them when they're continuing to behave in the way that they have behaved. So that's my experience with trauma and abusive people. And I don't know, what's your experience with abusive people? I hope that you don't have one. But if you do have one, maybe this will help.